Hello everyone, welcome to another session of ILA Dialogues. Today we have with us an eminent lawyer who has an exceptional professional background coupled with a pioneering spirit in the field of criminal law and trial advocacy. Advocate Ashish Chavan has been a leading criminal lawyer for the past 21 years and has also been a junior to Advocate Harshad Ponda. He has successfully appeared at the Defense Counsel in the sensational Anand Patrawala murder trial, which ended in acquittal by Sessions Court, Mumbai. He has represented actress Yukta Mukhi in a criminal proceeding before the Bombay High Court and has also represented Chitralekha magazine in the Tough Shoes obscenity trial before the Metropolitan Magistrate with successful acquittal. Advocate Chavan has also represented many leading doctors under medical negligence and malpractice suits and has appeared in writ petition before the Bombay High Court regarding negligence of hospital management, which led to framing of guidelines for security of newborn babies. Apart from this, Advocate Chavan has represented corporate clients like Reliance India, State Bank of India, Bennett Coleman and Company, Vodafone SR, Bombay Textile Research Association, Pyramid Diagnostic Services Limited, Hiranandani's, CNBC TV 18, etc. It's an honor to have you, sir, as our guest today. Today, Ashish sir will be speaking about demystifying the NDPS Act.
Okay. So Disha, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Actually, half of it I don't deserve. Well, so let us plunge into today's topic. Before that, I need to give everyone a disclaimer. Now, the disclaimer is basically that this is not going to be a boring legal lecture. We are not addressing the finer niceties of law here. Basically, what we will be looking at is something which germinated in my mind when I was looking at and reading various news articles, snippets, social media buzz, and all of that regarding the events which have taken place in the last 3-4 months, which surround this NDPS Act. Now, there were a lot of questions that my friends, my clients, my colleagues kept on asking me. They were very simple explainers. And that led to a thought in my mind. Why shouldn't I simply have a chat or a talk about these very simple concepts? They say that ignorance of law is not an excuse. So if we are, let us say, caught ticketless travel, or let us say we are caught with a parking ticket, we can't come back and tell the police officer or the person who catches us that we are not aware of the law. So since ignorance of law is not an excuse, the common man really can't say that he doesn't know or doesn't want to know the important provisions or concepts of the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. Actually, it's quite a mouthful. That is why I wanted to have this talk. So basically, this is going to be a freewheeling kind of explainer where I would be touching upon the conceptual aspects of the NDPS Act, as it is popularly called. And without further ado, we can start off with the very purpose of this act. Before that, let us see what that act actually is, because we keep on saying NDPS, NDPS. So what is this NDPS stand for? It stands for Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, 1985. What it means basically is that there are two different concepts. So the very definition actually provides an insight into something in the act. And what is that something? So there is something which is narcotic drug, and there is something else which is a psychotropic substance. So we will see both and we will understand what they are. Basically, this is an act whose purpose, when it was framed in 1985, because it is not that prior to 1985 there were no acts dealing with the issue of drugs. There were a lot of acts. In fact, opium trade, drug menace was there since ancient times, since the time there was the Silk Route. If anybody of you is fond of history, you will also see that there were some international wars called as opium wars, where China was involved. So it has a long history. Drugs have always been, contraband drugs have always been a controversial issue. But in India, it was thought of that in 1985, it was thought that there should be some stringent provisions for the control and regulation of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. So that is how the Act came into being in 1985. What does it provide for? Well, it provides for a lot of things. Prominent among them are the implementation of the guidelines of international conventions. So there are a lot of international conventions on the narcotic drugs. I don't want to go into the depths of it, but suffice it to say that there are various international conventions which are there, and India, as a signatory to those conventions, has to follow the precepts and guidelines laid down in those conventions. The primary purpose, if you ask me in one sentence, is to establish a very stringent and strict law to deal with the issue of drug trafficking, uh, drug manufacture, cultivation, and all of that. So basically, that was the design. It was designed to be a very strict law, a strict legislation. Now, there is a recent amendment in that legislation, which brings me to the third aspect or the third point of the purpose of this act. Recently, we find that there has been an proliferation in the manner in which the drug menace has increased exponentially. So it is not just limited to drug dealers, drug peddlers, drug traffickers, ultimately drug consumers, addicts. It has also become an international mafia, and which also results in a lot of amassing of property, which is from these proceeds of the crime. So what does one do about the property? The law until now was toothless. It was not strong or stringent enough to deal with the property which is acquired from the money which is or rather which is obtained illegally from the sale or the manufacture of drugs. So now we have a situation where these property can be straight away confiscated or forfeited. So that adds more teeth to the act. Makes it more strong. So as I said that the act came into being in 1985, then it was amended thrice, once in 1989, once in 2001, and latest in 2014, where this forfeiture of property as a very significant feature was added to the amendment. Now we come across, or rather we come to various definitions, because unless you know what we are talking about and that you and me are talking about the same concept, we will not be able to progress further. So we will discuss about the various narcotic drugs, and what are these narcotic drugs we'll come to a little later, but we'll start off with the definition of cannabis. Cannabis in Hindi it is locally called as bhang ka paudha. So this is something which is a biological student will probably call it Cannabis sativus. That is the generic name or the scientific name of this plant. It is like it's a plant like any other plant, but this is a very peculiar and a very controversial plant, I should say. You can't plant it, you can't cultivate it. You will go inside for 10 years if you do. So this is that way a very different kind of a plant. Now, what are the various parts of this plant which are used to manufacture drugs? So there is something which is popularly called as charas. Now this charas is basically a separated resin which is obtained from the cannabis plant. So there is a process by which the resin of that plant is taken out, and it is either in a crude manner or in a purified manner. It is converted into charas. Now again, the scientific name of this entire thing, charas, is called as hashish resin. Again, that is another contraband drug. So we have charas, which is obtained from cannabis plant. Cannabis is also called as marijuana in many countries. It is also called as hemp in English. So these are all synonyms of the same plant, basically. What is the other drug? It is ganja. Now, what is this ganja? Again, a local word. It comes from Hindi. So basically, charas and ganja are again Hindi words. So the flowering tops of this cannabis plant, if they are plucked and if they are mixed like tobacco and certain material is added to them, they become very, very potent and intoxicating. And that itself is a drug, a narcotic drug. Also, there is a third category. So there can be intermixing of these two elements, that is charas, ganja, or any other material which is added to make it more potent. So that is also included in that definition of cannabis. Now, very interestingly, you will find in states, especially in Rajasthan and some other states, there are some government authorized bhang shops. Now, what is bhang first of all? Bhang is basically something which is prepared from the leaves of this cannabis plant. So we are not talking of resin, we are not talking of the flowering tops, which is charas and ganja respectively. We are talking of leaves. जो पत्ते होते हैं उसके. So the leaves are basically, 1 second. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, fine. There was some glitch in that internet thing, so I have switched on off the phone. I hope this is a good connection. So I was, Sudisha, any issue? No problem. No?
No, sir.
Okay. So I was on that point where we were talking about the manner in which bhang is prepared from the leaves of this cannabis plant. Now, as we see, the preparation of bhang is something which I would say is strictly not covered under the NDPS Act, which is why you have these government authorized bhang ki lassi ki dukaan. You find them in Jodhpur, you find them in Jaisalmer, find them in many other states also. And there is nothing illegitimate about this government authorized bhang ki dukaan. Basically, this is the material or mixture which is prepared from the leaves of this plant. Now arises a very tricky situation. Now the tricky situation is this, that if you cultivate cannabis anywhere in India, if you cultivate cannabis, you are liable to be jailed for 10 years. It's an extremely serious offense. So where do you get the leaves? So this seems to be a gray area. Now the answer that law gives to that is these leaves are supposed to be plucked from the plants which grow in the wild. So they are not to be cultivated. So you can't have a theory where you say कि मैं तो leaves ही ले रहा था. Tops तो मैं नहीं लूंगा या मैं resin नहीं बनाऊंगा. No, you will go inside for 10 years. It's a very, very serious offense if you cultivate these plants. But therefore there are very limited, stringently controlled, authorized, licensed vendors who are supposed to sell these uh, bhang to common public. So that is why the government keeps it extremely restricted, because there seems to be some checks and balances to ensure
Hello, sir.
Hi, what happened, Sudisha?
I don't know, sir. You just seem to have gone off and come back.
That is amazing because my network is supporting. Anyway, I think we can continue.
Yeah.
The topic is so sensitive that the network is also playing tricks. So, so as I said, cultivation of cannabis is completely banned, and so also is the possession, sale, purchase of this charas, ganja, and mixtures of charas and ganja is an offense. Now, the only exception that one finds in the act is that if it is used for medical or scientific purpose. Now, cannabis, there is a raging debate all over the world as to whether cannabis is actually a muscle relaxant, which it is. Scientifically, it is a muscle relaxant. So many countries have contemplated decriminalizing cannabis or the use of cannabis, and many countries are in fact allowing cultivation of cannabis in a very controlled environment. uh, Probably my take on this so far as India is concerned is, I think it's a little premature for us to look at it as as a recreational drug, because the tendency in India is that one may overdo it. So it is really, it's little nascent stage for us to be sensitized about the use of cannabis in a very safe atmosphere. But there is a raging debate all over the world whether this particular drug, if taken in a safe form, is actually therapeutic for human use. Now, the punishment for the possession, manufacture, cultivation, etc., in the act, it depends on whether it's a small quantity or a commercial quantity. Now, what are these terms? Small quantity and commercial quantity are basically set out in a schedule to the act. So there is a chart. In that chart, you have these various drugs or psychotropic substances, and the chart will clearly tell you whether it's a small quantities, let us say 5 grams, or a commercial quantity could be 5 kilos. So it's clearly de-alienated. So there is no application of mind here. You can't have an interpretation ki मेरे पास जो है वो small है कि commercial. It's set out, set in stone. So that is one narcotic drug that we looked at. The second one is coca derivative. Now that is not cocoa, please. That's something else. So cocoa incidentally is also a seed, and chocolates and all these things come from cocoa. But we are talking about coca. Coca is again a plant. Now that is where you get the word cocaine. Now, cocaine comes from again a plant. Again, we have two kinds of cocaine. One is a crude cocaine and one is the processed cocaine. Per se, manufacture, cultivation of cocaine is also banned. So there is no exception to this. It is straight away banned. The third one is what is popularly known in Hindi as afim or opium in English. Now there are various derivatives of this opium, but again, this is a plant derivative. So opium is something which you can, opium or it's called poppy also. So this can be grown just like cannabis can be grown, but it should not be grown, of course, because again, the punishment is the same. So when you look at the punishment for cultivation of either cocoa derivatives, opium derivatives, or cannabis, the punishment is extremely harsh. It is 10 years. So the act basically sets off a very, very strong example, or rather it wants to make an example out of people who are cultivating this for commercial gain. So cultivation there is no question, it is completely outlawed or banned. Now these three drugs, so coca leaf rather, cannabis and opium, these are the three drugs which are called as narcotic drugs. So there we get the first answer to that question that we asked some 5 minutes ago as to what are narcotic drugs and what are psychotropic substances. So the first answer is narcotic drugs are coca leaf, cannabis and opium. These are what is defined in the act. So what are psychotropic substances? Now, roughly saying in layman's language, we call them hard drugs or synthetic drugs. Example, LSD, that's a long scientific name, lysergic acid, whatever. Then there is mescaline, then there is MDMA, then amphetamines, ecstasy. Basically, these are chemical fully chemical synthetic drugs which have no plant derivatives. So that is what distinguishes them, and we call them psychotropic substances. Now, the narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances have graded punishments depending on the category of the offenses. So, how do I explain that? Now, for example, the cultivation of cannabis, as I said, is 10 lakh, is 10 years imprisonment, which is rigorous imprisonment, mind you. So, very serious offense, and 1 lakh rupees, up to 1 lakh rupees fine. Now, what is banned? Production, manufacture, possession, sale, purchase, transport, or use of cannabis. And these expressions are going to be same for cocoa leaf, opium, and cannabis. So basically, this is how the template of the law is worded: possession, manufacture, production, sale, purchase, transport, and import export also. Of course, that's a very serious offense. We won't go into that because that is not what a layman should anyway know about, because if he does want to know about that, then already he is in big trouble. So this is how the law is worded so far as the three drugs are concerned. Now, again, I'll give you an example of what is small quantity and commercial quantity so far as cannabis is concerned. Now, the small quantity of cannabis is 100 grams and the commercial quantity is 1 kg. So are we saying that if I have 100 grams of cannabis, I'm going to be let scot-free? The answer is no. You will not be let scot-free, because possession of cannabis by itself is an offense, but it's a minor offense technically. So 100 grams can land you in 1 year jail or fine of 4,000. Now it's an or. So therefore there is a discretion that the court has. Either it can give fine or it can send you to jail. That would again depend on whether you are a first timer, whether you yourself are a consumer, that is, you are addicted to these drugs. In that case, you are looked upon a little more benevolently. So this is what small quantity for cannabis is. Commercial quantity is 1 kg, minimum 10 years of jail. So look at how the pendulum swings. So for somebody who's in possession, the law is relatively less strict. But for somebody who is doing it for commercial gain, the law is absolutely merciless. So it is minimum 10 years jail and fine of minimum 1 lakh. So both of these are minimum. So it could be anything, but it starts off with 1 lakh and minimum of 10 years of jail. So we find that as a thumb rule, for commercial use or quantity, the offenses are more serious, the punishments are more serious and grave. And for small quantities, either fine or minor imprisonment is there. Now, what about consumption? Because this is one question which keeps on cropping up. What happens to those people who consume or who are found consuming either narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances? Now, there are three drugs which they have mentioned. One is cocaine, one is morphine, and the third one is diacetylmorphine. So it's a variety or derivative of morphine. If you are found consuming these three drugs, then the punishment is jail for 1 year, rigorous imprisonment. If it is any other drug or a psychotropic substance which you are found consuming, mind you, consuming, not possessing, consuming, it can land you in jail for 6 months or a fine of 10,000 rupees. Now we come to a little harsher measures which are introduced in the law for curbing the illicit traffic. Now, why I'm talking about this in a talk which is intended basically for lay people? There is a reason. So I'll explain myself. Now, the punishment for financing illicit traffic and harboring offenders is more than 10 years. It's a very, very serious offense. Now, finance can be direct or indirect. Now, it is if it is such a serious offense, then we will have to also look at the things in a little more detail. Now, what is this illicit traffic? It will include, but it is not limited to, cultivation of cocoa, opium, cannabis, etc. Manufacture or possession, sale, import, export, which we just read. So, financing illicit traffic and harboring offenders. If I, for example, if I am giving a loan to a friend of mine by legitimate means, but that friend of mine turns to be a trafficker, and that person is utilizing that money in an extremely illegitimate manner to finance illicit traffic or to do illicit traffic. He is a peddler or a drug dealer. I will be certainly interrogated. And it is possible that the police might say, or the investigating agencies might say, that you have indirectly financed this entire peddling ring. So therefore, I must point out this, because this is something which even a layman can be concerned with. So this is something which the law says. Then we come to knowingly acquiring, use or possession of a property which was derived from an offense committed under this act. Now this is something new. This is coming 2014. So if you, let us say, purchase a property, let us say in Goa, because Goa is the one of the more talked about places when NDPS Act surfaces. So you let us say purchase it legitimately, no difficulty about that. But it so happens that there is an investigation, or there is maybe an ongoing investigation which you don't know about, and the Narcotics Control Bureau, which investigates these offenses, says that this property was purchased indirectly or directly, maybe through the proceeds of a drug deal, or through the proceeds of crime which is under the NDPS Act. Now the important part is knowingly acquiring. So obviously you can argue that this was not known to you, that you purchased it innocently, but that you will be able to argue only in a trial. So that is why you should be extremely careful even when you are investing in properties. There should be a certain amount of diligence, due diligence, background check, etc. So that you don't get caught into these kind of issues which may rise up later. Then attempt to commit offenses. Now the law always provides for two categories of punishments. One is the punishment, I mean the crime itself. Let us say cheating. If A cheats B, then it is a straight away offense and there is a commensurate punishment to that offense. But if, for example, a person, let us say, tries to kill another person, he doesn't succeed. What does it become? It becomes an attempt to murder. So the same way, if you attempt to commit any offense under the NDPS Act, it is punishable with the same punishment as provided for the main offenses. So again, it's a very strict interpretation, because if you look at this provision, even if you are not doing that offense, you have made an attempt to do it, even then you will be prosecuted as if you have done it, as if that offense has taken place. So that is again a very, very stringent provision of law. Then there is punishment for abetment and criminal conspiracy. Again, it is the same as the punishment for the main offense. In fact, it goes on to say that even if the offense is not committed, let us say you hatch a criminal conspiracy with somebody and attempt to commit an offense, but the offense is not completed. Even then you have hatched that criminal conspiracy, and if there is proof of that conspiracy and your involvement, then certainly you are going to be prosecuted and charged for the same offense as if you had completed that offense. Now again a very important concept of NDPS Act, which is again unique to this act, because in normal criminal law there is no presumption of a culpable mental state. So a person who does an offense under normal law, under IPC, he can say that I have not done it with any intention, I have done it in good faith, or I have done it as a mistake, or I have done it with the genuine intention of doing so and so. But that is not the case in NDPS. So the law is a little bit different in NDPS cases. there is a presumption that if I am found in conscious possession of a drug, I intended very much to possess it. So that presumption, of course, can be rebutted. But the stage of rebuttal is going to be at the trial, which is going to be quite far off. So first there will be an arrest, then there will be bail or no bail, then there will be a charge sheet, and then there will be a trial. So you will be able to say that, look here, I did not have the culpable intention, and this is why I say so. That stage is going to come pretty late. So the very fact that you were in conscious possession of a drug or a contraband or a narcotic drug or a psychotropic substance is enough for the court to presume that you have a culpable mental state. Now, all the offenses under NDPS Act, all of them are cognizable. Now, what does the word cognizable mean? Cognizable means where the police can directly take cognizance and act upon it. They don't require any authority or any permission from a court of law. So where the offenses are cognizable, the police can directly register. Now in NDPS Act, there is no concept of an FIR, but they can directly investigate the offense and they can arrest the person if they feel it necessary to do so. So they don't require a warrant. So the typical scenario that we see in many Hindi films, and Hindi films do perpetuate a lot of myths, is that the hero, swashbucklingly stands up and says कि आपके पास warrant है क्या? And the officer goes back a foot and says कि नहीं मेरे पास warrant नहीं है. And then the hero says तो warrant लेके आओ जाओ. So that kind of a thing, that kind of a stunt you should never do, because NCB officers are authorized to straight away search, siege and arrest. They don't require any warrant, and they can simply take you away from that office and house or wherever it is without requiring to show any warrant. So one is cognizable. I told you what is cognizable. They are also by default non-bailable. Now here is again a very mystifying concept. What is non-bailable? The first reaction many of my clients and friends and lay persons have is non-bailable matlab bail nahi milega, no bail. That is not the situation. Non-bailable means that you will have to apply for bail. Bail is not a matter of right. So where do you apply for bail? You apply for bail in the court of law. And what is the process? The process roughly is you apply for bail, then your lawyer argues and satisfies the court that there is no need for custodial interrogation in this case, either because you are cooperating with the investigating agency or there is nothing more to be investigated in that case. And then after hearing the public prosecutor or the state machinery, the court decides whether to grant you bail or not. So that is how a non-bailable offense works. So all offenses under the NDPS Act are non-bailable. All of them are cognizable. Then you have the concept of offenses by companies. Now this is a very interesting concept. If an offense is committed by a company, let us say, what happens? Who gets prosecuted? The answer that law gives is all persons who are in charge of and responsible for the affairs of the company. Now, typically for a layman, what would that be? It would be the directors. Directors are normally in charge of and responsible for the affairs of the company. It could also be the company secretary in some cases. It could be, so it would depend on what role is assigned, but primarily directors are de facto held to be in charge of and responsible for the affairs of the company. Now, company also involves or also includes a partnership firm. So one has to be very careful. If you are a director of a company or an important official of a company, you should be completely aware as to what exactly the company is doing. Otherwise, you can't say tomorrow that, look here, I was not aware of all these things that the company was doing. That special knowledge again has to be proved in a court of law in a trial. But primarily, if the company is into drugs or drug dealing or whatever offenses under the NDPS Act, the directors will be prosecuted certainly. Then this is something which is extremely important because this has cropped up in the recent issues which are discussed in the media also. Normally a statement made to the police officer under normal general criminal law is not admissible, because any statement made to a police officer, our law says that it has no credible value. It has some use, but that use is certainly not to be used against the person who's making it. So one, it cannot be self-incriminating, and second, the statement made before the police officer has no sanctity in law. It is simply inadmissible in general criminal law. Now in NDPS, this concept is turned on its head, and there is a particular provision which is a departure from the general criminal law, which says that even a confessional statement of the accused can be recorded by the investigating officer. So you have to be very, very, very careful what you are going to say to the investigating officer. Normally, lawyers tell that you say whatever you want to the police officer, we can subsequently retract it or we can get away with it. Now that unfortunately is not the case in NDPS offenses. The police officer, when he records a statement, is authorized by law to record it, and whatever the statement is 110% going to be used against you. So even if it's a confession, so it goes to the extent of giving those kind of powers to the investigating officer. So one has to be extremely careful. Now the property, as I said, the property which is obtained by the accused out of the proceeds of the crime can also be seized and disposed of. I think we have already dealt with it. Now I'll conclude my, I think it's 5:30. Yeah. So I can conclude my talk with two things. What are the remedies that one has if unfortunately one finds himself being at the wrong end of the law, being arrested in an NDPS case? What are the remedies? So there are various remedies, but I'm going to discuss a few which are very topical and immediate. So the first thing is obviously, can I go for anticipatory bail in an NDPS case? The way the NDPS law is worded, especially relating to bail, without going into the niceties of it, all I can say is that it becomes the concept of anticipatory bail virtually becomes redundant. So the onus that is placed on the accused is so high that he will get bail. Now, I'm not talking about anticipatory bail, I'm talking about regular bail, one that you apply for after you are arrested and not before you are arrested. So even for that bail, the parameters and the yardstick is so huge that unless you can establish that there is no prima facie case against you, you will not get even bail. So it is that difficult. So forget about anticipatory bail. So is there a provision? Yes, there is a provision, but is it really efficacious? No, it is not efficacious. So the most prudent thing to be done if you are accused of an NDPS offense and you have the good fortune to come to know about it prior to your arrest. That is something which, because the Narcotics Control Bureau are a group of very intelligent and elite officers. They will not, let one know that this is being what is likely to happen. So they will come and straight away arrest you, and you will be left with no option but to apply for bail. But in that very slim chance that you come to know that you are being falsely accused of an particular offense, then instead of an anticipatory bail, people recommend a writ petition. But that is again a very technical subject. But the purpose of telling you all this is basically to drive home the point that getting bail in any NDPS offense is a very difficult exercise unless you have open and shut case. And normally there are no open and shut cases in NCB offenses because they do their homework and come. So getting bail is extremely difficult. So I think I have reached the end of the concepts that I wanted to talk about. If there is anything that is in the, if anyone has a question or a particular point that one wants to clarify, then I think we have time for that. 10 more minutes, I guess.
Does anybody have any questions?
Udisha, you have any questions?
Actually, sir, I think you did cover. Mine was more on the recreational, the recreational bit. So, in terms of India, as you can see, there are certain states where it is legal for maybe a certain period of time, and even for that matter, as you said, bhang, and there are government shops, that are there. So the leaves, as they say, is legal, but the rest is not. So I wanted to know your opinion of of having this as a recreational drug in India, and considering that some states have already, allowed it, not at all time, but at certain, as per convenience, if I may say so.
Well, again, we have to approach this answer from two aspects. One is in certain cultural contexts, having bhang on a particular day, for example, Holi, is something which is part of which is embedded in the culture. So even the gujiyas that you make, the mithais that you make, many families there have a family system, or parampara, as which is what is called, that they put a little bit of bhang in it. So the use of cannabis that way was never underground or never socially ostracized. It has got a lot of spiritual overtones to it, and that is why probably bhang in India is strictly, so I would say it's a gray area. Now, if you say recreational drugs, then the question is how does one define what is recreation? Because one man's recreation could be another man's destruction. So recreational drugs is stretching it a little too much, and even to the extent of saying, can we decriminalize it completely and have shops, let us say in prominent cities, where you can go for a therapeutic course which may have, let us say, some elements of bhang derived products in it, which are within the four corners of law. I would say personally, because I always say this, that we are not limited to metropolitan cities. India is not metropolitan cities. So we have to look at the larger cultural milieu and see if it is acceptable to the non-urban population also. And if you ask me personally, I think that time has not yet come. So we need to be a little more sensitive, a little more evolved to be able to look at it as a therapeutic drug and not as an excuse to do something else in the guise of therapy.
True, sir, but what about the fact that there is there are places and where this is available, to students, very very young students, because I think that also slows down your brain development and things like that. So um, how would you, I mean, of course narcotics bureau can't be everywhere, so how does one control that in all this?
I think the young generation and drugs has always been a problem since I was a young kid myself. So I think it is largely to do with the concept of experimentation that comes along with youth. Then there is various kinds of experimentation, and one of the experimentation, apart from alcohol, etc., etc., could be drugs. So how does one curb it? I think one of the answers could be sensitizing the peers, because ultimately it is the peer pressure or the lack of peer pressure that motivates a person to do something or experiment something. So if it's part of a subculture, then it is going to seep into that boy or a girl. If 20, if 80% people are okay with it, isn't that the same concept almost in every other proposition that you have? Respect for a woman, for example. If 80% people are okay with not having absolutely any respect for a woman, and you are part of that group, and it becomes very difficult for you as a young teenager to walk out of that group, then that is how sort of propositions are perpetuated. So I would say a large part of it would be sensitization by parents, by elders, and also taking into confidence that young man or woman, and saying that it is okay even if you make a mistake. So I think that pressure cooker situation should not be there. That if I do something, and if my parent or my mother or father comes to know, they will simply hide me for it, simply flay me alive for it or something like that. So if that fear goes away from the child, then probably he may confide, and then the further tragedy can be avoided.
All right, sir, I think this is it then. um, Thank you so much,
My
sir,
pleasure.
for taking out the time, and Hope to see you soon, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank
Hello,
you.
stay safe.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.